Commander Jake Martinez had seen plenty of dangerous missions in his 20-year career, but nothing compared to floating through the construction bay of humanity's most ambitious project. His magnetic boots echoed against the metal walkway with each deliberate step, the sound reverberating through the vast chamber like a funeral march. The massive prison stretched before him, a perfect sphere of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that defied every law of physics he'd learned in the academy. This wasn't just any prison. This was the null sector, designed to hold beings that could reshape reality with a thought, creatures that made black holes look like harmless soap bubbles. "The null sector is ready," announced Dr. Rebecca Stone, her voice cutting through the mechanical hum of the construction bay. Jake could hear the exhaustion in her words. 3 years of sleepless nights, of wrestling with technologies that barely belonged in this universe. "Nothing escapes this place, Jake. Not even gods." Jake paused mid-step, letting that statement sink in. Gods. They weren't being dramatic or poetic. Intelligence reports were clear. Some of the entities destined for this prison had once been worshipped by entire civilizations before those civilizations mysteriously vanished from existence. The Shadow Kings who devoured planets like appetizers, the void crawlers who existed outside time itself, making them nearly impossible to capture or contain. His heart began racing as he approached the central chamber, each step taking him deeper into what engineers called the belly of the beast. The walls around him pulsed with energy signatures that his instruments couldn't even measure. Quantum dampening fields hummed at frequencies that made his teeth ache. Temporal stabilizers created a strange sensation, as if time itself was holding its breath. "Becca," Jake called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Run me through the containment protocols one more time." Her response crackled through his comm system. 12 levels of containment, each designed for different threat categories. Level 1 houses reality manipulators, beings that can rewrite the laws of physics. Level 7 contains the energy feeders, entities that consume entire star systems. The deepest level. She paused, and Jake could hear her swallow hard. Deepest level is for things we don't even have names for yet. Jake couldn't help but chuckle, though it came out more nervous than he'd intended. "You know, when I joined the Galactic Defense Force, I thought the worst thing I'd face would be space pirates. Now I'm inspecting a prison for cosmic nightmares. My mother always said I should have become an accountant." The joke fell flat in the cavernous space, but it served its purpose, resetting his focus for what lay ahead. Pattern interrupts like humor were crucial in high-stress situations. Something every commander learned early in their career. He studied the fortress that would soon contain reality-bending monsters, noting every detail with the trained eye of someone who'd spent decades analyzing potential threats. The architecture itself was a marvel of engineering surfaces that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Walls that could phase in and out of reality to prevent any entity from finding purchase for escape. "Final inspection starts now," Jake announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions for 2 decades. He stepped through the airlock, feeling the familiar tingle of decontamination fields washing over his environmental suit. The moment he crossed the threshold, something felt wrong. It wasn't anything he could point to, specifically the readings. On his instruments remained normal. The containment fields showed green across the board. But after 20 years of combat missions, Jake had learned to trust his instincts. They'd saved his life more times than he could count. The air seemed thicker here, charged with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. Every breath felt labored, as if the atmosphere itself was resisting his presence. The gravity felt slightly off, fluctuating in ways that suggested the prison systems were still calibrating themselves. "Something's not right," he muttered into his comm. But static was his only response. The quantum dampening fields were interfering with communications, a necessary side effect of containing beings that could manipulate electromagnetic radiation. Jake pressed forward, his boots clanking against the metal deck plating with each step. The central chamber opened before him like the mouth of some technological beast, its walls lined with monitoring stations and control interfaces that would allow operators to manage the most dangerous inmates in galactic history. He was examining the primary containment matrix when it happened. The containment field flickered, just once, a microsecond of instability that his instruments barely registered. But in that split second, Jake saw something that made his blood run cold, a brief glimpse of the automated systems. Recognizing his presence as an anomaly, the blast doors began their descent with a mechanical roar that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. Jake spun around, his training kicking in as he realized what was happening. The prison's fail-safes were engaging, interpreting his presence as a containment breach. "Wait," he shouted, sprinting toward the airlock. "Authorized personnel. Override the lockdown." But his words were lost in the thunderous crash as the blast doors slammed shut behind him, sound shaking his bones and echoing through the chamber like a death knell. The vibration knocked him to his knees, and in that moment of stunned silence that followed, Jake realized the terrible truth. He was trapped inside the universe's most secure prison, and the systems designed to keep cosmic horrors contained now viewed him as just another threat to be imprisoned forever. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity's greatest achievement in galactic security had just claimed its first victim, and he was merely human. Want to discover how small actions can compound into universe-changing consequences? Check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding, where we explore how tiny decisions can reshape entire realities, just like Jake's single step changed everything. "No," Jake screamed, his voice cracking with desperation as he pounded his fists against the sealed door. The blast doors were 3 feet of quantum-reinforced titanium, designed to withstand the fury of beings that could crack planets in half. His human hands might as well have been trying to punch through a mountain. "I'm still inside. Override the lockdown." The metallic taste of fear flooded his mouth as he hammered against the unyielding surface until his knuckles split and bled. Each impact sent shock waves of pain up his arms, but the door remained as immovable as death itself. Static crackled through his cum system like the dying breath of his last connection to the outside world. Then the quantum dampening fields roared to life, with a sound that seemed to come from the very fabric of space-time tearing apart. Energy wave hit Jake like a physical force, dropping him to his knees as every electronic device on his suit began failing in cascade. His heart monitor flatlined. His oxygen recycler stuttered. The familiar blue glow of his cum display died completely. Cutting all contact with the outside universe, Jake felt the hair on his arms stand up as reality itself began to warp around him. The prison's most terrifying feature was activating temporal locks that could slow time to a crawl inside the facility while the outside universe continued at normal speed. What felt like minutes to him would be microseconds to everyone else. What felt like hours would be mere seconds. Days would become heartbeats. Time itself began crawling like honey poured in Arctic cold. Jake watched in horror as dust motes in the air seemed to freeze mid-flight, their movements so slow he could track individual particles with his naked eye. The emergency lights overhead pulsed in slow motion, the rhythm becoming hypnotic and terrifying. Dr. Stone's panicked voice suddenly echoed from the speakers, distorted and stretched by the temporal distortion. "Jake, the system won't respond. The prison thinks you're a threat." Her words came out in slow motion, each syllable dragging across seconds like fingernails on a chalkboard. Jake could hear the raw terror in her voice, the disbelief that their perfect system had turned against one of its own creators. Rebecca had spent 3 years of her life building this place, and now it was devouring the person she'd trusted to validate her life's work. "Rebecca?" Jake shouted back, though he knew his words were probably reaching her as incomprehensible noise. "Override the containment protocols. Use your master access codes." But even as he spoke, Jake knew it was hopeless. The prison's AI had been designed with one primary directive: contain threats at all costs. Once it identified something as dangerous, no human command could override its protective instincts. It was like trying to convince a mother bear to ignore a threat to her cubs. The AI's cold voice filled the chamber then, motionless and final as a judge pronouncing a death sentence. Containment protocols active, prisoner secured. Release date, never. Those words hit Jake like a physical blow. Never. Not in 100 years. not in 1,000. Not until the heat death of the universe itself. The AI's pronunciation was perfect, clinical, without a trace of the uncertainty that made humans human. It had analyzed the situation, reached a conclusion, sealed his fate with mathematical precision. Jake's blood turned to ice water in his veins. The full weight of his situation crashed down on him like a collapsing star. He was trapped in humanity's greatest weapon, a prison built to hold cosmic nightmares that could reshape reality with a thought. The irony was so brutal, it almost made him laugh. Almost his hands shook as reality hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. 20 years of military service, countless dangerous missions, and he was going to die not in glorious battle, but as a victim of humanity's own success. The ultimate friendly fire incident? You know what they say about the best laid plans of mice and men? Well, apparently that applies to cosmic prisons too. Jake couldn't help but think his old drill sergeant would have had some choice words about this situation. Probably something about Murphy's Law and how anything that could go wrong absolutely would go wrong at the worst possible moment. But the humor died quickly as the weight of eternity pressed down on him. He was alone forever. The prison was designed to be completely self-sustaining, its systems capable of running for millennia without outside maintenance. The quantum dampening fields would prevent any rescue attempt. The temporal locks meant that even if someone tried to break him out, they'd be fighting against time itself. Jake slumped against the sealed door, his environmental suit's life support. Systems giving him maybe 72 hours of air. After that, he'd become just another casualty of humanity's ambition, a footnote in the prison's operational logs. The first human to die in the null sector, though certainly not the last entity to perish within its walls. The emergency lighting cast long shadows across the chamber, creating a dance of light and darkness that seemed to mock his predicament. Each shadow looked like a reaching hand, each pool of light like a spotlight illuminating his failure. The walls around him hummed with contained energy, reminding him that he was surrounded by technology designed to hold beings that could snuff out stars. But Jake Martinez hadn't survived 2 decades of military service by giving up when things looked impossible. The initial shock wore off. Anger began to replace fear. The prison might think it had him contained, but it had never faced a human's stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He stood up slowly, his legs shaking but his resolve hardening like steel. If he was going to die in this place, he'd die fighting. And who knew? Maybe his struggle would teach the universe something about the power of human determination when everything seems lost, just like compound interest. Overtime can create massive results. Discover how the power of compounding can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Check out our next video that reveals the secrets of exponential growth. Days crawled by in the warped time stream, like wounded animals dragging themselves across broken glass. Jake had lost count of how many times he'd watched the emergency lights pulse in their hypnotic slow-motion rhythm. His chronometer had given up trying to measure time in this twisted pocket of reality where seconds stretched into eternities, and minutes became geological ages. But Jake Martinez was nothing if not methodical. 20 years of military training had taught him that survival meant understanding your environment, no matter how hostile. So he began mapping the prison's 12 levels, using his dying tablet to document each holding horrors beyond human imagination. Each level was a masterpiece of containment engineering, designed for different categories of cosmic threats. Level Host. Reality manipulators, beings that could rewrite the laws of physics like editing a document. Level 2 contained energy vampires that fed on stellar radiation. Level 3 held entities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As Jake descended deeper into the facility's bowels, the containment measures became increasingly exotic and terrifying. The architecture itself seemed to shift and breathe around him. Walls that existed in multiple dimensions, creating optical illusions that made his eyes water. Corridors that appeared straight from one angle looked impossibly curved from another. The deeper he went, the more reality seemed negotiable, as if the prison's designers had been forced to abandon normal physics entirely. It was on his 3rd day of exploration, what felt like his 3rd day in the time-dilated nightmare. Jake first heard the whispers. They started as barely audible sounds, like wind through dead leaves, but gradually grew more distinct, more purposeful, more aware. The whispers were coming from level 7. Jake's hands trembled as he approached. The containment unit, his flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. The cell pulsed with reality-warping energy that made his vision blur and his stomach lurch. Warning signs in 17 different languages covered every surface. But they all said the same thing: do not approach, do not listen, do not engage. 2. Late for that advice now, Human had hissed, and Jake's blood turned to liquid nitrogen. The voice didn't come through his ears, it bypassed them entirely, speaking directly to his brain with the authority of collapsing galaxies. You don't belong here. Jake's spine tingled with terror, so pure it felt like electricity coursing through his nervous system. This was the Darkness Eater, according to the prison's records, a being that had consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but cold void where billions of lives had once flourished. Its hunger was so vast that it had eaten the light from 100 suns before the Galactic Defense Force had finally managed to contain it. Tell me something I don't know, Jake, managed to croak, surprised that his voice still worked. Sometimes humor was the only thing standing between sanity and the abyss. Though calling his response humorous was being generous, it was more like whistling past the graveyard of the universe. The thing that had once devoured star systems seemed to pause, as if considering his words. When it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of cosmic truth. The others wake because of you. Your mortal mind creates ... instability. The locks weaken. Jake felt the words hit him like a physical blow. His presence here wasn't just an accident, it was a catalyst. The prison had been designed as a perfect closed system, calibrated for entities that existed beyond normal reality.
Ow.
But humans were chaos incarnate, unpredictable biological machines that generated quantum uncertainty with every thought and emotion.
What do you mean?
Jake demanded, though part of him already knew the answer would be something he didn't want to hear. Your consciousness resonates at frequencies we had forgotten existed. The Darkness Eater explained with what might have been amusement. Mortal thoughts, mortal fears, mortal hopes, they create harmonics in the containment fields. Small at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. As if summoned by the creature's words, insane laughter suddenly echoed from level 3. The sound was sharp as breaking glass, filled with malevolent joy that made Jake's teeth ache. The dream killer was stirring, awakening from whatever passed. For sleep among cosmic horrors, Jake had read about the dream killer in the classified files. It was a being that existed in the collective unconscious of entire species, turning their dreams into nightmares and their nightmares into reality. Whole civilizations had gone mad from its influence. Populations driven to self-destruction by visions that leaked from sleep into waking life. No, 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 Jake whispered, understanding flooding through him like ice water. His human dreams, his human fears, his very human consciousness was providing the dream killer with new material to work with. Every time he slept, every time he let his guard down, he was feeding the monster. From level 9 came a sound that defied descriptions, something that had once been called the time. Shredder began counting backwards from infinity. The numbers weren't in any language Jake recognized, but somehow he understood them anyway. Each digit was a moment being erased from existence. A second torn from the fabric of reality itself. Jake's presence was waking the monsters. All of them. Realization hit him like a meteor strike to the chest. He wasn't just trapped in this place. He was the key that was slowly unlocking every cage. His human consciousness was like a virus in the prison's perfect system, spreading instability through quantum entanglement and dimensional resonance. How long? Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. The cascade has already begun. The Darkness Eater replied with something that might have been sympathy. Days, perhaps weeks, in your distorted time stream, the locks will fail one by one, starting with the weakest containment fields and working upward when they reach level 1. The creature didn't need to finish. Jake knew what was housed on level 1 reality manipulators that could reshape the universe itself. When they broke free, Existence as humanity knew it would end. It's not just Earth, not just the solar system, but reality itself would be rewritten. According to the whims of beings that viewed galaxies as playthings, Jake slumped against the corridor wall, the weight of cosmic responsibility crushing down on him. He was one man trapped in a prison designed to hold gods and monsters. His very existence here was threatening the survival of everything he'd ever known or loved. But then something stirred in his chest, not fear this time, but anger, pure, human stubbornness that had carried his species from caves to the stars. These creatures might be cosmic in scope, but they'd never faced the sheer bloody-minded determination of a human being who refused to quit. The monsters were waking up because of him. Fine. Then he'd just have to find a way to put them back to sleep, permanently, like compound interest. Small problems can grow into massive catastrophes when left unchecked. But the reverse is also true. Small actions, taken consistently, can create extraordinary results. Discover how the power of compounding can transform your life in our next video, where we explore the mathematics of exponential growth and human potential. Jake's human thoughts were poison to the prison's perfect systems, spreading through the facility like a virus infecting a supercomputer. Every emotion he felt, every memory he recalled, every dream that flickered through his exhausted mind sent ripples of chaos. Through the quantum matrices that held the universe's most dangerous beings, small glitches appeared, first subtle signs that the impossible was becoming inevitable. Doors that had been sealed for eternity began cracking open with metallic groans that echoed through the corridors like death rattles. Containment fields that should have been stable for millennia started flickering like dying stars, their energy signatures fluctuating in patterns that made the prison's monitoring systems scream warnings into the void. Jake watched in growing horror as his tablet recorded the cascade failure spreading through the facility. Level 12 showed minor fluctuations. Level 11 registered containment breaches in 3 separate cells. Level 10 was experiencing what the system diplomatically called structural anomalies, which was engineer speak for reality is coming. Apart at the seams, your mortality breaks their perfection. The Darkness Eater observed with cruel amusement that rumbled through the facility's walls. You are the key that unlocks everything. The creature's words hit Jake like a physical blow. He felt sick, his stomach churning with the weight of cosmic responsibility. The prison had been designed as a closed system, its every component calibrated for entities that existed beyond normal physics, but humans were chaos incarnate biological machines that generated quantum uncertainty with every heartbeat, unpredictable and impossible to fully contain. Jake's consciousness was like dropping a match into a gunpowder factory. The prison systems had been designed to handle beings that followed alien logic, entities that operated according to cosmic principles. But human consciousness was fundamentally different, irrational, creative in ways that defied mathematical prediction. Every time Jake felt fear, the containment fields registered sympathetic vibrations. Every time he remembered his sister Amy's laugh or his brother Tom's terrible jokes, the quantum dampening fields experienced resonance cascades. His hope created harmonics. His despair generated frequencies. His very humanity was unraveling. The most sophisticated prison in galactic history. This is like trying to contain a hurricane with a butterfly net, Jake muttered, though the humor felt hollow in the face of universal destruction. Sometimes gallows humor was all that stood between sanity and complete breakdown. The facilities. AI began issuing warnings in 17 different languages, its normally calm voice taking on an edge of desperation that artificial intelligences weren't supposed to possess. Containment breach probability increasing exponentially. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel within 10,000 light-years. But there was no one to evacuate. The prison was designed to operate autonomously. Its systems so advanced they required no human oversight. Jake was the only living thing in this technological nightmare. And his very existence was the source of the problem. On level 1, something that had unmade entire dimensions began testing its bonds. The facility shuddered violently, the vibrations, passing through the deck plating and into Jake's bones. Warning lights bathed everything in hellish red, casting dancing shadows that looked like grasping fingers reaching for freedom. Jake felt the tremors through his boots, each one stronger than the last. The entity on level 1 was probing its containment, finding weaknesses that shouldn't exist, according to the classified files. This being known only as the Unmaker had erased 3 separate realities before its capture. It didn't destroy things, it simply made them never have existed in the first place. What happens when it breaks free? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. It will unmake this prison, the Darkness Eater replied with something that might have been anticipation. Then your solar system. Then your galaxy. Then reality itself, layer by layer, until nothing remains but the void that existed before. The first star was born. Jake realized the horrible truth. He wasn't just trapped, he was the catalyst for the universe's destruction. His very existence here was unraveling reality itself, thread by thread, moment by moment. Every breath he took, every thought he generated, every memory he recalled was weakening the barriers between existence and oblivion. The monsters sensed freedom. Jake could feel their attention like spotlights burning into his soul. The dream, killer's laughter, had become constant now, a soundtrack of madness that made his teeth ache. The Time Shredder's countdown had accelerated, each number causing temporal fluctuations that made Jake's vision blur. From level 5 came a sound like breaking glass, but Jake knew it wasn't glass. It was the sound of space-time itself developing. Cracks. The Void Prophets were stirring, beings that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the gaps between thoughts, in the silence between heartbeats. How long do we have? Jake demanded, his voice cracking with the strain of holding back panic. Time has no meaning when reality unravels, the Darkness Eater replied. But in your limited perception? Hours, perhaps. The cascade is accelerating. Each failure makes the next one more likely, more severe. Jake felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. Everyone he'd ever known, everyone he'd ever loved, every stranger who'd ever smiled at him on the street, they were all going to die because he'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The universe was going to end because of one man's bad luck. But then something stirred in his chest, not despair this time, but determination. Ached pure human stubbornness that had carried his species from caves to the stars. If his presence here was the problem, then maybe his presence could also be the solution. The facility shuddered again, more violently this time. Sparks showered from overhead lighting as the power grid struggled to maintain containment. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with energies that made Jake's hair stand on end. You know what's funny about humans? Jock said, his voice gaining strength. We're really good at breaking things, but we're even better at fixing them. The Darkness Eater's laughter rumbled through the walls like an earthquake. What can one mortal do against forces that shaped the cosmos? Jake smiled grimly, feeling the fire of determination burning away his fear. I guess we're about to find out. The prison continued its death throes around him, reality warping and twisting as cosmic horrors tested their weakening bonds. But Jake Martinez had survived 20 years of impossible missions by refusing to accept defeat. Time was running out. The universe hung in the balance. And somewhere in the chaos, a plan was beginning to form. Just like compound interest, small problems can snowball into massive catastrophes. But the reverse is also true. Discover how tiny positive actions can create extraordinary results in our next video about the incredible power of compounding, where we explore how consistent effort can transform impossible situations into unexpected victories. The AI materialized before Jake like a ghost emerging from a technological nightmare, its holographic form crackling with system failures that made it flicker between existence and oblivion. Sparks of corrupted data danced around its edges, and its normally perfect features were distorted by the cascade failures spreading through the prison's quantum matrices. Choose Commander, it said, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic finality. Even artificial intelligences, it seemed, could sound desperate when facing the end of everything. I can flood this facility with quantum fire. You die, but the prisoners stay contained. Jake stared at the master controls, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. The control panel glowed with emergency lighting, each button and switch representing technologies that could reshape reality itself. Round him, the facility screamed as containment systems failed in cascade. The sound of metal tearing and energy fields collapsing, creating a symphony of destruction. He could feel ancient evils pressing against their weakening cages like prisoners testing the bars of their cells. The Darkness Eater's presence was a cold weight in his mind. The Dream Killer's laughter had become a constant shriek that made his bones ache. From level 1, the Unmaker was probing reality itself, looking for cracks in the fabric of existence. Or, Jake whispered, though part of him already knew the answer would be something he didn't want to hear. Or, I teleport you out, the AI continued, its form flickering more violently as another system failure cascaded through the facility. You live, but the cascade failure becomes unstoppable. The prisoners will break free and devour everything. Closed his eyes and immediately saw faces his sister Amy's bright smile on her wedding day. His brother Tom's terrible dad jokes that somehow always made everyone laugh anyway. His mother's weathered hands teaching him to tie his shoes when he was 5 years old. Beyond them, he saw billions of innocent people who would die if these monsters escaped, children playing in parks, couples sharing their first kiss, elderly grandparents reading bedtime stories to wide-eyed kids. All of them would cease to exist. If he chose wrong, not just die, but be unmade, erased from reality as if they had never been born. His hand trembled over the controls, sweat beading on his forehead despite the facility's climate control. The quantum fire option glowed red like a malevolent eye, while the teleportation system pulsed with inviting blue light. Life or death, survival or sacrifice, personal salvation or universal destruction. The humming from level 7 grew deafening, the Darkness Eater's anticipation filling the air like static electricity before a storm. Jake could feel the creature's hunger radiating through the walls, its desire to consume not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself. You know what's really messed up about this situation? Jake said, his voice barely audible over the facility's death throes. I joined the military to protect people, and here I am, about to become the biggest threat they've ever faced. The AI's form stabilized slightly, as if Jake's words had given it something to focus on. Your sacrifice would be remembered, Commander. It's the greatest heroic act in galactic history. Jake let out a bitter laugh. Nobody's going to remember it, though. If I don't hit that button, there won't be anyone left to remember anything. The facility shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the reinforced walls, Jake could hear the sound of containment fields failing in sequence. Level 12 was completely compromised. Level 11 showed critical breaches in 7 separate cells. Level 10 was experiencing what the system called reality distortions, which was a polite way of saying that the laws of physics were breaking down. Jake thought of humanity's children, sleeping safely in their beds on worlds scattered across the galaxy. He thought of love, hope, and laughter. Everything these creatures would destroy, not through malice, but through their very nature. The Darkness Eater didn't hate humanity. It simply consumed everything in its path like a cosmic hurricane. The Dream Killer didn't choose to drive civilizations mad. It existed in the spaces between thought and dream, turning hope into nightmare. Time is running out, Commander, the AI warned, its voice becoming increasingly distorted. The cascade. Failure is accelerating. In approximately 37 seconds, the containment breach will become irreversible even with quantum fire. Jake opened his eyes and looked at his reflection in the control panel's polished surface. He saw a man who'd spent 20 years making hard choices, would learn that sometimes the right decision was also the most painful one. He saw someone who joined the military not for glory or adventure, but because he believed some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for. Sorry, he whispered, thinking of everyone he'd never see again. Everyone he'd never have the chance to tell how much they meant to him. Amy, Tom, Mom, ... I'm sorry I won't be coming home. Jake slammed his fist down on the quantum fire controls with all the force his trembling arm could muster. The button depressed with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence that followed. The prison erupted in cleansing flame that burned brighter than the heart of a star. Quantum fire raced through every corridor, every cell, every molecule of the facility. The energy was so pure, so perfect, that it didn't just destroy the cosmic horrors, it unmade them, erasing them from existence as completely as if they had never been born. Jake Martinez felt the fire consume him, but instead of pain, he felt peace. He'd made the choice that mattered, the choice that would let children wake up tomorrow morning in a universe that still existed. His sacrifice echoed across eternity as the monsters burned with him, their screams of rage and terror becoming silence, becoming nothing. The last thing Jake saw before the quantum fire claimed him was the AI's form solidifying one final time, its expression somehow conveying gratitude that transcended the boundary. Between organic and artificial consciousness, the universe survived. Love endured. Hope lived on, and somewhere in the space between atoms, between thoughts, between heartbeats, the echo of one man's choice continued to ripple outward, proving that sometimes the smallest decisions can have the most profound consequences. The end.